All right, welcome everyone. My name is Rob Wellington. I'm the Director of Outreach here at Zinch, and I also run our webinar series. I'm very happy you could join us today for our very first webinar of the new school year. Today I'm pleased to introduce Anthony Russomanno from the Princeton Review. Anthony is an SAT prep expert. He has worked with hundreds of students and families, helping those students make great gains in their SAT scores. And he actually presented for us last spring. We had a really great presentation, got a lot of good feedback on it. So I wanted to invite Anthony back to present again in the fall on the SAT. So what today is going to consist of, it's going to be a 1 hour webinar, and that's going to consist of Anthony going through some tips and tricks on the exam, and whether you're a senior looking to take this exam, hopefully, for the last time very soon, or an underclassman who wants to learn a bit about the SAT and get a leg up on other students getting ready to take the test. This should be a good lesson for you. So we're going to have a presentation from Anthony. We're going to have a Q&A session. So you can ask any questions you'd like of us. There's a chat icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. If you type a question in there, it's actually going to go to me, and then I will go live and pose the question of Anthony. Most questions we'll hold off at the end, but we will have a few breaks during his presentation for you to ask questions. So without further ado, Anthony, take it away.
Thanks, Rob. Welcome everybody to our SAT strategy workshop. As Rob mentioned, I'm with the Princeton Review, and I've been working with them, counseling and teaching students for over 17 years. For those of you who do not know, the Princeton Review is the nation's leading SAT test prep provider. I'm not here to sell you on our services, but I'm here to educate you, students and parents, about standardized testing, and that's one of my favorite things to do, is to help students beat this test. So the Princeton Review does not write the exam. We help students prepare for the exams. That's what we do. So I'm just going to jump over to my um, a little, I guess, background on myself. You can take a look at it. What I want to point out here is my email address on this page. It's anthonyr@review.com. So if you have some follow-up questions after the session, please reach out to me there, or my phone number with my extension. So reach out to me if you have something specific about you, because tonight's session is going to be more general, because it'll cover a wide variety of students as we kind of go through this. So as far as today's agenda goes, this is kind of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about some quick facts and misconceptions. We'll talk about those tips and strategies Rob mentioned. We'll talk about a testing timeline, and then we'll open up for Q&A at the end of this. So, but before I even start, what I want to mention, this is not a substitute for true preparation for the SAT. An hour long, and if that, is not meant to kind of handle all your prep needs for an SAT. It requires a lot longer preparation than that. It's kind of a precursor to help you gain some insight and direction, but it's not intended for you to walk away and then all of a sudden score 200, 300 points higher than that. That requires more formal preparation, months at a time and stuff. So hopefully after tonight, you have I shed some better light on the entire exam, and then alleviate some of your fears or frustration when it comes to the SAT. So that's kind of what I'm going to do tonight. For those of you taking it in a few weeks, good luck, but there's probably going to be more that you need if you want to really jump your score a couple hundred points. So that's tonight's agenda, and that's what I plan to do. So with that said, let's actually jump into kind of looking at the overall breakdown of the SAT. For those of you who've taken it before, you kind of know what's on it, but I want to quickly go through that. It's offered 7 times a year. You can see the different sections on the test. You can do all this research yourself, and I'm going to let you do that. For those you do not know, the maximum score is 2,400 with 800 per section for math, reading, and writing. And those are some average scores on there. But again, I'm going to go through some of this stuff fast because I want to get to the meat of my presentation, which is learning the tricks and the tips and strategies surrounding the SAT. The reading section, there is 67 questions, and it covers anything from critical reading, diction, vocabulary. There's reading comprehension, sentence completions. But again, you can do the research on that. The math covers basic arithmetic and geometry. There's 54 questions. There's two 25-minute sections. You can learn all this stuff again on either College Board's website. You can go to princetonu.com and learn about what's on the test. And here's what's on the writing. The writing includes multiple choice questions surrounding grammar as well as an essay. So that's kind of what the test is and what it has on it. Again, you can do all this research yourself. But let's talk about these misconceptions about the SAT, which is probably the most important thing that you kind of walk away with. Is the first thing is really don't take this stuff personally, okay? But here's some of the misconceptions that the SAT scores, it measures your intelligence. If you have a high GPA, you're going to ace the test. The best scores win in college admissions. So these are the misconceptions. But what I want to spend some time in is really looking at the truths about it. What does the SAT really measure? And what it really measures is how well you take the SAT. The SAT doesn't even actually stand for anything. It used to have aptitude in there, but now it just stands for the SAT. It doesn't really measure how well you're going to do in college. Your GPA and your course load in high school is a better determinant of that. It's just one of those hoops you have to jump through. So we're going to talk about how you can do well on the SAT. That's kind of what I want to spend. So again, what I said, don't take your test scores personally, okay? It doesn't measure your intelligence. You can increase your score with proper coaching. I'm tutoring two students right now. One's up to over 2,200 and has improved 300 points, and another one, probably by the time we're done with it, is going to improve about 600 points. Now, he did start low. So you can increase your scores with the proper work. GPA is still more important than your test scores, or your course rigor is still more important than the SAT score. So just remember that's only one piece of the puzzle. And but test scores are still relied heavily upon. So those are your testing truths, okay? And again, we're going to go through this fast because an hour is not a long time. What I have here are the 5 things that, at least the topics that I'm going to cover on this testing strategy, okay? So those are the 5 things. It's kind of a teaser slide, so you kind of pay attention. So these are the 5 categories. So stay connected throughout the night. I'm going to be kind of connecting the dots with these 5 things along the way. So the first thing that I want to talk about in terms of strategy when you're approaching the test, and it doesn't just have to be the SAT, is knowing thy enemy. And I say enemy lightly, but the SAT or the test writers of this exam are we going to classify as the enemy. Okay, if anybody knows who the enemy is, you can chat that in the chat window. If who knows anybody who writes this exam, and it's not Princeton Review, chat it in there. Rob, you can tell me what people are saying. But if we know who writes the exam and what they're all about, if we know the content that's covered on the test and how it's set up or the format of it, it's going to help us prepare for the test, as opposed to going in blindly and taking it and going, oh, it was a multiple choice test. Oh, there was an essay on it. If you know the things that you're going to approach when you actually take it ahead of time, you're going to do much better. That's why if you see all in sports team, they watch game film. They spend, in the NFL, they spend a whole week preparing for their next game, for that next opponent. You have to do the same thing, but more than a week. So let's actually look at all the components of knowing thy enemy. But first, let's figure out why we take the SAT. Okay, and this is really important. Well, as I mentioned earlier, it's part of the admissions package. It's what you have to do. It's a hoop you have to do, as well as it's a way for colleges to compare all students on the same scale. So someone from Bennett High School to Marlboro High School, how do we compare them? Well, beyond the GPA, we need a test score to compare them. So that's why you take the SAT. But there's also another reason why, and it's a money-making machine. They make a lot of money, and again, Princeton doesn't give the SAT. It's the College Board and the people who write the test, which is ETS. Okay, and the way they want the test to go, and people are like, why don't you give me a trick or a strategy? Well, this is really important. It's going to help our strategy. Here's how they want you to score when you take the test. They want a lot of people scoring right in the middle range of those medium scores. They only want a few on the high end and a few on the low end. Now I have it scored in each section, which 800 being the highest in each section. But the medium scores is where the majority of the people score. And they want it this way. If everyone did well and were scoring perfect scores or 750 and 800, the test wouldn't be credible. If everybody scored really low, nobody would want to go to college. They didn't think they were cut out for college. So they want you to score right in the middle. And knowing that is going to help us because there's going to be some red flags on the test that we'll get into that are going to help you approach the test better. Okay? So take a look at that. So here's a reason why some students are going to struggle on the test. In terms of the number of exams. On the SAT, it's designed so you can't actually finish. In high school, your teachers want you to finish. Your answer choices can trick you on the SAT. Well, in high school, they just want to assess what you know and what you don't know. And it's more of a content test. The essay on the SAT, they give you 25 minutes. In high school, you get to take it home and write your own essay and everything. In the reading comprehension, you're under real time constraints. Huge. Well, in high school, you can bring it at home and read. Um, and the math is really intentionally hard, and it covers years and years of math, as opposed to in high school, it's typically the 1 year that you're in, and it's very straightforward. So this is one of the reasons why students will struggle on the SAT. I put this slide up just to kind of give you an idea of what the people who write the test, they know. They know your brain, and they know what your brain is going to do and how your brain processes information. And they actually take this and they use it against you. And I'm going to show you how. That's pretty cool, huh? Other reasons why they struggle is, again, the writers who write the exams. And the people who write these exams, they're not your professors or they're your teachers. They're professional test writers. They write tests for golfers. They write tests for firefighters. They write tests for you, going to college. Um, so we're going to do a little exercise right now. Oop, it was a word association. You might have seen that first word. But I want you to think of a word. And after I say a word, I want you to chat in the window, and Rob, let me know what people are saying. Here's the first word. Here's the word association. Whatever you see, then think of the word. Peanut butter. Do Rob, we have any chat? Anybody answering in there what they thought of?
Yeah, I'm seeing the question show up. I'm not seeing the specific text. I'm having some issues on my end. So I might have
Oh,
to
okay.
do a hack where
No
people just
worries.
chat it to my email.
Okay.
So it
No,
looks like
not a
people are
big deal.
chatting it, but yeah, give us your response, Anthony.
Okay, well, I'll move on to the next one. So I'm saying another word, and I want you to think of the first word that comes to your mind when you see it. Boy, or when you hear it. And now this time, I want you to think of a number, any number. Okay. Now, are you an average person, average Joe? I call him. That's my picture of average Joe here. Did a lot of you say jelly or bread when I said peanut butter? Did a lot of you say girl when I said boy? If you did, not a big deal. It's just a lot of us say that. I know I would say that. I used to say that too. And when you think of a number, did anyone pick a number over 1,000 or a negative number? How many of you picked a decimal? Most of us pick just a general number like 12 or 2 or 8, 15, 25. Um, but many people aren't picking negative numbers. So the reason I do this type of exercise is I need you to understand that you could have picked any word, but most of you probably chose jelly on the first one. We are very predictable. And the people who know that we're very predictable are the test writers. And because we're predictable, in order to get that bell-shaped curve that I showed you, they use some of the answers that they know you're going to say against you. And so that's why this first tip about knowing thy enemy is very important. And we'll come back to it and I'll keep referencing this. But this is kind of what I call average Joe, is you can fall for some of these traps. And so sometimes being predictable hurts you on this exam. Okay, so let's move on to the next tip. It's taking the test on your own terms. No matter who you are, you got to look at yourself differently than your friends or another person sitting next to you and look at your own personality and how you work a test, what works for you, and use that. You can't take the test under someone else's terms or the test writer's terms for that matter. So you've got to manage your own test. You have to know how you study best. You need to know your own personality. And ultimately, you need to know how to pace yourself. Some students go way too fast for what they're capable of doing. And that just, it's not a good way to take the tests. So do what works best for you and how you handle your stress. If you take deep breaths and that calms you down, then do those things. And you have to know all these things. And it sounds weird, but for testing like this, it all comes into play. It's not just all about what you know. Okay, it's also manage yourself during a 4.5 hour exam, because that's how long you sit for to take this exam. So let me show you another point of this, taking it on your own terms. For example, I'll give you one example here in the math section. So this is kind of from our manual, the Princeton Review Manual, and how we teach students. If you didn't know, the test is set up in order of difficulty. And what that means is the test in the math section, there are easy questions, there's medium questions, and hard questions. The thing about it is we know where they are. Except most students who take the test, they don't prepare properly and they don't really think about it. But I'd rather do the easy questions than the hard questions, because they're all worth the same amount of points. This chart here just shows you the different sections of math and where the easy, medium, and hard are. They go in thirds. And they go in thirds based on the types of questions. So in the multiple choice before the grid in, it's in thirds of easy, medium, and hard, and the same thing in the grid in. And then that big long section in the middle goes easy, medium, or hard. So the point is, knowing where the easy questions are really important. But you're going to go, Anthony, well, they're in the beginning. So if I just start with the beginning and I move to the end, it makes sense. Well, here's something to keep in mind. I was tutoring a student recently who was scoring 430 in math, 430 out of 800. Not a great score, and for him, not a great score. He wasn't a great math student. But what I noticed about him was he attempted all the problems. And part of the issue and the problem for him is he would actually spend all this time mainly in the hard questions because they took longer. And then he would get those wrong. And because he spent more time in the hard questions, he'd get some of the easy questions wrong because he would rush through the tests. So because he spent so much time on the hard questions, he made too many careless errors. And that's why he was scoring a 430. So before I taught him any math on how to actually attempt the problems, I actually told him, you're not allowed to do any of the hard questions. And by doing fewer questions, especially the hard ones, he had more time for the easy ones. Now, this isn't rocket science, but this is taking the test on his own terms, what worked for him. So by doing many fewer questions, so for example, in the 20 question section in 25 minutes, he only did up to question number 14. Well, he went from 430 to 610 in a matter of 2 months. Not so well, he learned some math along the way, but mainly because he was pacing himself and he was taking it as on his own terms. And he wasn't doing the hard questions, which he never was going to get because he wasn't a great math student. So that is taking an example of taking the test on your own terms. Very, very important on all the sections of the test. So I can't reiterate this. It's so important. So here's another tip. And again, I'm going fast through this, and you got to understand, I spend all summer long with students preparing for the SAT. It's not in an hour. So some of the tips I'm giving you, they need more explanation. They need more practice and implementation than what I'm just saying. But I'm pointing them out to you to kind of go, make you think a little bit about what you're doing or what you're doing incorrectly or what you can be doing to help yourself. So here's another tip. I call it POE, or process elimination. Now, the SAT is going to be harder than this, but the point of POE is to really narrow down your choices so it increases your probability of getting something correct. So here are 5 choices. If I just said, what is the capital of Malawi, and I didn't give you a multiple choice, most of you probably wouldn't know it. But if I gave it to you in your multiple choice question, you could probably cross out what's probably not the answer. It's not A, it's not B, it's not C or D, and there's my answer just based on process elimination. So the great thing about the SAT is the answer is there. You can find it 2 ways because you know how to do it, or you can eliminate all the wrong answers. And it's a very powerful technique that Princeton U students use all the time, and you get actually very good at doing it, and it requires some practice. So kind of going on to the next tip, which kind of ties in with process elimination, is guessing. So a lot of people go, well, I don't know the answer, so I didn't guess. I left it blank. And the big question I get all the time is, should you guess? And it really depends, and it's going to depend on a couple things. So I'm going to take you through a situation. So what would you do in these scenarios? There's question one. Now you don't even know what the question is yet. There's question one, you eliminated one. Question two, you eliminated two. And question three and four, you eliminated three choices. So what would you do in these scenarios? Well, the question shouldn't be what should you do right now. The question should be, well, how is the test? How does it work? What's the format of the scoring of it? So let's talk about that, because that's going to dictate to you how you should guess. So let's talk about it. So what happens when you get something right on an SAT? If anybody knows, chat it in. Rob, if you actually can see it, let me know what people they're saying. What happens if you leave something blank? And what happens if you get something wrong? These are three really important questions that are going to determine how you approach your SAT. So I'll give you guys a second to think about it. And here's how it works. You get one full point. Now these are raw points, and the raw points translate into a test score. So you get one full point if you get something right. You gain or lose nothing if you leave it blank, and you lose a quarter of a point if you get something wrong. You actually don't lose any points if you miss a grid in or a student produced response. That is how the test is scored. So knowing that, when we look back at this situation, it should actually tell you what you should do in every instance. Now, because of time and because of interaction and the way this webinar is set up, and we have a lot of attendees, I'm going to kind of skip over and instead of calling on some students here and just kind of explain to you how it works. So, excuse me. If you're down to two, for example, on question 3 and 4, we're down to two. We eliminated A, B, and C. What should you do? You should definitely guess. If you ever leave a 50-50 question blank on an SAT, you're making a bad decision. And the reason being is, think of it in terms of money. You get a dollar or you lose a quarter. And if it's 50-50 and you have two choices, you're going to get one right and one wrong. You're actually going to gain 1 point for getting number 3 right and lose a quarter point for getting number 4 wrong. So you actually gain 3/4 of a point by answering question 3 and 4, even if you didn't know what the question was or what the answer was and you guessed randomly D. So you're earning points. So a big thing strategically is to make sure you're answering when there's 50-50. If you leave them blank, you're leaving points on the table. In the scenario of question number 1 and question number 2, you should still actually, my students always guess, and it sounds weird, but probability says in number 2, you still have a 1 in 3 shot, so you actually have an opportunity to earn points. And if you can eliminate one, my students are really good guessers because we work on that. I have my students still guess. The only time they leave something blank is if they read a question and they don't know what the heck is going on, or they don't even attempt the question because of their pacing. So it becomes a very important scenario here, the POE and guessing. So here's just some more strategies around it. Remember, you should get a habit of crossing things out if you know something's wrong. Know the order of difficulty. Be aggressive. If you can't eliminate anything, leave it blank. Skipping is okay if you don't know what to do. And then flipping a coin to determine what the answer should be, it takes too long. So what we use, and my students use letter of the day. If you're left with a few choices, they have a letter going into the test that they choose. And if that one's crossed out, they go to the next letter right next to it. I choose A for Anthony. So if A is crossed out already, I go to B because it's closest to A. And that saves you 5 seconds. That extra time, you need all the time you can get. Okay, so we're going to take what I've been talking about and we're actually going to put it into a problem here. So I want you guys to take a look at this problem and I want you to actually attempt it. So read it to yourself and start working on it. I think Rob's going to send you a poll. of what you guys think the answer is. Take a minute or two. And remember, on an SAT, you probably only have a couple minutes per question because it's the time pressure is on. But we'll see what you guys can get, and then we'll talk about the problem. And if you've seen this question before, please refrain from. Well, you can't shout out the answer because you're on mute. But Rob, you got some answers yet?
Yep. Most popular answer is with 50% is 4.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's talk about this problem. Now, I've been going for 20 something minutes already, and I've been talking fast, and I've been talking about taking the test on your own terms. I've been talking about average Joe and being predictable. I've been talking about the test writers who are our enemies, etc. I've been talking all about this stuff. Now we're actually going to put into practice everything that I've been saying, and I'm going to show you guys um, what we're up against. And I mean, this was actually on an SAT many years ago. So the first thing when I work with my students is we read a question. I want to know what it's really saying. So I have my students try to rephrase it in their own words if they don't know what it's saying. But basically here, you have a donut, you need to cut it with 2 straight lines, and how many pieces are you going to get? But the other thing I need to do is I need to look at the question number it is. And the question number it was is an 18, and there's out of the in the 20 section or the 20 question section, that means it's a hard question. Well, when there's a hard question like that, I'm sure the people who picked C at 4, you got the answer very fast. Well, that's kind of like you probably are the people, whoever picked C as 4, you probably, when I said peanut butter, you said jelly, and if I said boy, you said girl, because you're very predictable. Well, this is why they get the normal distribution in that curve, is those people who pick C, you're probably very good students, but you fall for the trap. That's probably how you cut the donut. So what I'm going to do, and the way I approach strategically is like I said, it's a difficult question. So the answer is not going to be that easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cross C out, and I'm going to start using process elimination. And I'm going to cross C out because it was too easy. And if I already could get 4, which I showed you here, then I can already get 3 and 2. So it can't be 3 or 2. So I'm crossing out C, D, and D. I'm left with A and B now. Now, what I told you about guessing before, if I had a 50-50 choice and I knew nothing else, I should guess. And for those that leave it blank, again, you're leaving points on the table. So in this scenario, I should definitely guess. But I know one more thing. I know that they have these lead words, such as greatest, which attracts me to number 6, which on a hard problem, when I see these lead words, they're trying to distract me. So I'm going to, again, cross it out. And I'm going to pick 5 by default because it wasn't any of the other answers. It was like that question, the capital of Malawi. It's not this, it's not this, it's not this. Same situation in this problem. So So how do we really do the question? Well, if you were actually taking the SAT, you shouldn't sit back and try to figure it out. You should answer the question and move on because you just don't have the time. But I know some of you guys will rack your brain, but that's how you would actually cut the donut to get your 5 pieces. But this isn't necessarily a mathematical concept, except there's some tangent lines here and everything like that. Just sometimes you know it, sometimes you don't. So again, knowing your personality, and if you're very predictable, you can use that to help you. If you know your average Joe, there he is on the screen, and I know I'm that way, I use it to help me that if C was too easy and being 4, I'm going to cross it out. And then I'll start eliminating that way. So here's a sample problem that you can see on the math section. 99% of the country got it wrong when it was on the SAT, and most of them picked C. So it was a hard question, but again, one of those things the test writers put on there hoping that everyone gets it wrong, and they do because they fall for some of the traps. Now, there is content on the SAT, and there's mathematical ways to solve problems, but this is just one example of a problem that you're going to see. Now, the math on the SAT is not difficult math. Everything you've had probably by the end of your sophomore year is what's going to be tested. But you got to know the questions are in order of difficulty. Keep in mind, easy questions have easy answers. Difficult questions have difficult answers, like we just saw there. And knowing the order of difficulty is going to help you eliminate answer choices, as we just saw. So again, that's a sample problem that you could see. So what's really being tested? Um, Rob's going to send out another poll. So what's being tested is you got stuff such as fundamental math, basic math. Here's an example of math, the number 0. We had that a long time ago. Some of you guys are in pre-calculus or calculus, algebra 2, or geometry. You're not studying what 0 is. So is 0 even, odd, neither? You don't care? You really don't care. And we're going to do another question about 0.
Most people say neither. 70%. 26% say even. Only 1% doesn't care, but 2% really doesn't care. So
All
neither
right.
first place, even second place.
All right. And then is the number 0 positive, negative, neither? And again, I don't care. I really don't care. I'm sure my 2% of I really don't care is still standing strong. We'll probably have 4% there. So here's a concept that's tested. Now, they don't just give it to you like that. What is the number 0? They put it in a problem, but they're going to remember, or they're going to know what you forgot and what you didn't forget. What did we get on this one, Rob?
Yeah, so actually, very quickly, everyone, I can now see your questions. So if you do have questions, go ahead and chat them to me. No need to email. Sorry about that. Neither, 75%, positive, 19%. I really don't care, 5%.
Okay. So here's the thing is if you don't know 0 is even and you don't know it's neither positive nor negative, you're going to get a question wrong on the test. It's not a hard concept, but it was a concept we had many, 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 many years ago. But then they put it in a problem. For example, how many distinct even integers are the number 202, 485, 743, and then, A, B, C, or D, and then answers there. But if you don't know what distinct means, you don't know what an even number looks like, and 0 is even, you're going to get one wrong. So they take concepts. We won't do this problem. This one. They take concepts, fundamentals like properties of 0, prime numbers, like is 1 a prime number and it's not, 2 is the only even prime. If you don't know those things, you're going to get some wrong. But here's the math you're going to cover. Some geometry, really basic geometry. Algebra 1, some maybe a little bit algebra 2, basic arithmetic, ratios, proportions, things like that. That's all that's being tested on the SAT. So again, if you prepare properly, there's no reason you should be studying calculus. For some of you, you're actually probably in a higher math than what's being tested, which is going to hurt you a little bit. So you almost got to relearn some of the stuff that's being tested. So again, I'm trying to show you guys that being prepared is going to help, but you also got to know what's on the test, and you've got to use some of these strategies that I'm talking about. So the next tip that I want to talk about before we kind of end it is technique. And what technique is are step-by-step methods for actually solving specific problem types. My teachers and I, we teach the Princeton review techniques because we've proven them to work, where we actually go in and we take tests and make sure they work on SATs. And whether you do a certain reading type, comprehension type of question, like an inference question, or you do a sentence completions, there are steps you should be doing. So I'm going to show you a couple techniques before we end it, but this is really valuable. And if you're taking the test without any techniques and you're doing questions differently each time, you're going to struggle. Well, we're going to skip this. We'll go to a math question just because of time. Here we go. So here's a sample math question, and I'll show you a technique. So take a look at it. And the kind of math problem this is, one, it's an algebra problem. Why do I know? Because there's x involved, and it says in terms of x. Well, again, my students, I teach them a Princeton U method called plugging in. And what it does is we try to take the algebra out of it. I used to teach math in high school. The way I taught algebra in high school is different than the way they teach algebra on the SAT. Because the algebra on the SAT, I actually steer you away from using algebra and actually have you do just basic math by using this this technique called plugging in. So what we do here is we're going to cross out in terms of, and we're going to pick our own number. Okay, so what we want to do is pick any number you want. Some of you might pick 5, some of you might pick 20. Plugging in a number, it becomes very skillful in what number you pick. That takes practice. So I'm actually going to pick a number for you guys for now. But again, you won't learn plugging in overnight. You got to do a lot of practice to it. So let's just say E is equal to 20. So if Eric pays X dollars, so we're going to choose Eric paying $20. And now we're going to go back to the problem and start solving for what we call the target. So let's say Lisa, Eric, and Michelle buy a television. Lisa pays half as much as Eric. So if Eric pays 20, how much does Lisa pay? She pays 10 because that's half as much as Eric. Then Lisa pays twice as much as Michelle. Be careful on the wording on it. It's not, Lisa pays twice as much as Michelle. So Michelle pays 5. So when we're solving this, now we're using actual numbers. And if we do that, they go, if Eric pays X dollar, how much does the television cost? We add this all up, 20, 10, and 5. So simple math. We're just doing addition. The target is 35. The television costs $35 when we pick X for 20. So all we have to do now for this technique is actually plug into the problem. We put 20 in for X, and we're looking for 35. So our answer here is B. And this is what we call a technique. And this is what we teach our students at Princeton Review. Techniques for all the different question types on an SAT. So when you recognize this is an algebraic problem with this variable X here, we can do something called plugging in. And we make the problem just simple math as opposed to algebraic. Makes it a lot easier, especially on the harder questions. So that's an example of a technique on the math side. And again, if you have some questions, chat them over to Rob. I will answer questions at the end. But again, I'm going through this quickly to kind of just show you different points along the SAT, from strategy to technique, different tips here. So you can start really thinking about it and ingesting the information about the SAT to say, hey, I can prepare myself to be ready for this and do a much better job than just going in cold and seeing, oh, this is what I scored. Be prepared for it. You're going to do much better on it. So this technique is one of the or the best techniques you can use on an SAT, because you can use it on geometry questions that have variables. You can use it on a problem like this. You can use it on average questions that have a variable, and it's really across the board in the math section. You can use it on a grid-in question. So with that problem, that's a sample, a technique. Let me show you
Real
one
quick,
on,
Anthony, on
just
that
because of
problem,
time.
a couple questions on that
Yeah,
problem.
yeah.
Why did you choose 20 to start? Or people are asking, what's a good number to choose? How do people figure out what to choose?
Great question. And again, plugging in numbers, it takes practice. But the reason I chose 20 is it said Lisa pays half as much as Eric and twice as much as Michelle. I wanted to pick a number that wasn't like a number 2 where I might go into the negative number. So I wanted to pick a number that was large enough that I could go down on. So 20, 10, 5, something like that. So I picked a number like 20. And because it had half as much and twice as much, I needed a number that 2 went into and 4 went into, etc. So I could actually do that and it didn't become a fraction of a number. Like I didn't pick 19 because half as much as Eric, because then it makes the math more difficult. Then you got to go, oh, well, half of 19 is, oh, shoot, they got 950. And I didn't want to do that. So picking certain numbers makes the math easier. It takes practice. So, if they said half as much as this and 3 times as much as that, I would pick a number that 6 went into, because half is 2 and 3 times 3, I multiply them, I would pick a number that 6 went into, like 24. So you have to pick a number very carefully. Good question, though.
Great, thanks.
And since it's only an hour session, I had tons of problems, but we're only going to I'll show you one more quick technique in sentence completion because it makes sense. So here's a sentence completion. Big key on sentence completion is vocabulary. And that's something, if you guys email me, or actually I'll follow up with you guys. For everybody who's registered tonight, I will send you a hit parade list of some top vocabulary words you can study instead of studying the dictionary. Or if you want to email me and just, again, I'll still follow up with you if you have any specific questions because you have my email. But instead of studying the dictionary, my teachers and I, or in our classes, we give the most frequently tested word because we track them after every SAT. So I'll give you a shorter list, but those are the words you should start studying instead of pulling out the dictionary. So here's an example. These would be actually hard sentence completions, but the technique for sentence completions it might sound weird, but when I did sentence completions in high school, I just tried every single word and plugged them in the blank and just see what worked. That was a very bad technique of mine, and I didn't do very well on sentence completions. But the first thing we want to do is before we even look at the answer choices, so I actually covered them up for you, is in every sentence completion there is something called a clue. And so if you find the clue, that's going to help us determine what the word is going to be. So the first thing we're going to do is actually underline the clue, and I circle any trigger things, trigger words, or trigger, like here's the sentence number 7, semicolon is a trigger. A semicolon tells me that the sentence is going to stay in the same direction. So at number 7, I underline away from the topic because that is the clue that tells me what word's going to go in the blank. Sometimes you don't realize it when you read a sentence that the context of the sentence tells you some of the words and how they're supposed to be used. So most of Alice's comments were blank. They directed the conversation away from the topic being discussed. So the next step I want to do is actually I want to pick my own word in the blank. I don't want to look at the answer choices and be tainted. So I'm going to pick a word, and I'm only going to do number 7. I'm going to pick off topic or away from the topic as the word that I'm going to plug in the blank. And then what I do, then I'm going to remove my hand, or in this case, my blue box, to find out what word I'm going to use. And in this technique, again, vocabulary becomes very, very important. But off topic, A is focused. That's not off topic, so it's not A. B, obtuse. Well, if you don't know what obtuse is, you can't cross it out. If you don't know what an intermittent means, then you can't cross it out. But if you know what those words mean, you can cross those out. But the word tangential here is something that means off topic. So that's going to be my answer. Now it's a number 7. Well, in this scenario, there's probably only 8 sentence completions. So numbers 7, 8 are the hardest ones. So the vocabulary will be the hardest. But the way you approach using your technique is the same way on a number 1, which is easy, a number 2, which is easy, versus a 7 and 8. You have to find your clue. You have to plug in your own word, and then you eliminate looking for the word you plugged in. Again, that in itself, picking words becomes a process and something you have to practice. But it does pay off. It definitely pays off. So that's an example of another technique. And these techniques, from plugging in on the math to these sentence completions, they're all over the place. You have to find what works for you. And if you've been practicing already and you don't have very good techniques, you have to find a way to get some good techniques. Whether you buy a book, you get a tutor like myself, you take a course, you have to do something. But if you go in there without a technique, doing sentence completions, you're going to struggle on them. And we even have techniques when you don't know a word, how you still get past that. And that's from using parts of words, from using the sentence if there's 2 blanks. So there's a lot of things you can do. So that's just a sample of a sentence completion technique. Now, because we're running out of time, I'm going to move on to out of techniques and talk about another tip. And it's called triple P with A. And what that means is practice, practice, practice with analysis. So you really have to take multiple practice tests if you really want to look at improving on an SAT. But it's not, you don't take them 3 days in a row or 4 days in a row, multiple tests. You actually have to take a test, then analyze how you did on the test in terms of what questions you got right, how many geometry circle questions you're getting right or wrong, how many area questions, how many easy sentence completions, the grammar, what kinds of errors are you making, are they misplaced modifiers, and actually look at them so you can work on those weaknesses as you prepare and take more practice tests. Also, with multiple practice tests, you're going to build your endurance, You're going to build your speed and accuracy. You'll lower your test anxiety because you know what's coming. Um, and when you're doing it too, you want to stagger those practice tests, which I told you. You don't want to take them all in one week. You want to space them out every month, every few weeks, depending on how many months you're planning to prepare. So with that, something you can always do is you can go to princeview.com/events. You can even go to our website. We offer a free practice test. If you're in one of the cities where we offer an event, we have practice tests sometimes at your high school, local events that are typically free unless the school's doing a fundraiser and we're working with them. But you could take them and get a score where it's practice. It doesn't go on your record and see how you do. You got to get yourself in the actual test setting before you go in it for real. So that's a really big tip. Too many people go in and they take the real test without doing multiple practice tests, and they should understand why they kind of break down or get nervous or whatever, or have that anxiety level high, is because they're not familiar with it. My tutoring students, they do 5 full-length exams that we both analyze uh, in a 2 to 3 month period. So kind of getting back to what those 5 things were, whether you realized it or not, these are the 5 things that I mentioned earlier that you're going to need to succeed on the SAT. Number 1 is content, and we didn't go over content just because I don't have the time to, but that's learning how to do an average problem. That's learning what a ratio is. That's learning what a misplaced modifier is, or subject-verb agreement, um, or what an idiomatic expression is. That's the content of the SAT. What's on the writing section? What's on the reading section, what's on the math section. You got to learn that content. But most students who are really good students, they have that, and that's why they get straight A's in school. But they don't have number 2, 3, 4, and 5 when it comes to an SAT, and that's why they may struggle. You might be one of those students. I know I was. Is the strategy, we talked about it, from guessing to pacing, taking the test on your own terms, to techniques. I showed you some sentence completion. I showed you a plugging in, to the practice and analysis, and then lastly, that confidence endurance. With these 5 things, you're going to do much better than you initially probably set out to do if you only had number 1. So those are the big things on succeeding on an SAT. Um, just because of time, Rob, I'm going to open it up to questions now. Um, but for those of you that are juniors now, you should be thinking about taking this SAT in the fall, or at the latest, probably March of your junior year. So that's my timeline thing. But
All right,
I'll
great.
leave
Yeah.
this up and we'll open up to questions right now.
So a few questions around this, Anthony, for those seniors out there who are going to take the exam on October 5th and they're hoping that's the last time they take it. Obviously, it's not too much time. So can you give a couple recommendations or thoughts about the ways that they can best prepare over the next few weeks before that October 5th exam?
Uh, Rob, it's a hard question to answer because everyone's going to be different. I don't know what whoever asked the question, and I don't know what they've been doing. If we're trying to say it's the last few weeks, well, this isn't the make or break. It would have been like, what did you do over the summer? So if you have a few weeks less left, what I would say is you should be continuing to do what you've been doing. So hopefully they've been doing something. If they haven't been doing anything, then it's what I call the hope and pray method. Rob, have you ever heard of that one?
Yeah, I've heard that works sometimes, but not too often.
It
Um,
works sometimes. It's just you're hoping and you're praying. Go to church, do something, but it's just not going to happen if you've done nothing up to this point. So what I can say for those seniors is hopefully you've been working over the summer doing the things that I said, multiple practice tests, looking at some strategy and technique, and doing those. Continue to do those the next 3 weeks, taking many times sections, doing full-length tests, and that in itself should help you at least bump it up a little bit. But you've got to be really committed and focused. Nothing else should get in your way. Friday night, you shouldn't be going out. You should be studying, and just you're a senior. This is it. You don't have any more chances and opportunities. So there's no one size fits all, and there's no one easy fix. But what I can say is, I told you 5 things that you can do. So are you struggling in strategy? Then get some new strategy. If you're struggling in technique, get some techniques under your belt. If you have the content down, great, you have number one. But I gave you 5 things. So what area are you weak in? And then go work on that. So work on your weaknesses, and that should help you.
So
Another thing to mention,
we'll send that
guys.
this recording to everyone as well. And yeah, absolutely. If you have a few weeks, the more focused time sections and practice tests you can take and then analyze between now and then is going to help. But hopefully, you've been doing something in the meantime. Similar question, I'll just kind of answer this, and you can let me know if there's anything you want to add, Anthony. People asked, do people do better as a senior taking the SAT than as a junior? And I think that answer is yes, if they've done some prep and practice in between time. But if they haven't done anything, typically the score is pretty much the same. Is that what you see?
Well, I mean, here's the thing: is also it's very individualistic. Sometimes sophomores do better than seniors and juniors because they're in the appropriate level math that they're testing. So I don't know what math you were in as a junior. Sometimes you're above the math level. So it really depends on where you are and what you, like you said, Rob, what you've done. But that's all irrelevant. Forget, like, look at you and individually yourself, and I would just say, what do you still need to work on? But that probably doesn't play if seniors do better than juniors do better than sophomores. That really doesn't matter and play into it. What I can say, as you pointed out, if you're prepared properly, then it really doesn't matter how you match up in that whole scheme of things. Um, the other thing for seniors, you do still have 3 weeks. If you're really struggling, you can get a tutor, you can do something else, you can go buy a book, you can do it. So again, if you haven't done anything, there's still a little time, or you take the November exam, or you take the December. Some schools will accept a December exam, and you do that. So if this is getting you a little nervous, you still have maybe another chance or two, depending on where you're applying to really go, and think about it and sit back and go, I need to change my approach. I didn't really think about it this way. And that's kind of the other thing that I wanted to do. So the fact that you may be asking those questions maybe got you thinking that, oh, okay, well, maybe I need to approach it a little differently. And that's what I wanted to do with today's section. So for you seniors, I'm not trying to be hard on you or anything like that, but hopefully now maybe you're thinking about it and you can do something and make the change for you. Even if you only have 3 weeks left, then you push it to November, you still have another month and 3 weeks. So that's a possibility.
Great.
Another thing too, I have a special offer on the board for anybody who attended tonight. You can reach out to me for this. It gives you just, if you think you want some prep, there's some options that we have there where I'm giving you a discount just for taking the first step with us. So reach out to me, and I'm happy to kind of guide you in that direction.
And we'll include all this in the follow-up email that's going to go to everyone, correct?
Yes,
Great.
exactly.
So yeah, so seniors also look at the November and December SAT offerings and look at the schools you're planning to apply to and see if they accept those. If you would like to take it again or would like some more time, people ask about, do they take your top score? Do they look at all your scores? That's specific to the schools you're applying to. So just look at the schools and it'll say how the score reporting works. For the underclassmen taking the PSAT soon, how is that different from the SAT? Is that a good indicator for SAT success? And uh, is it okay to use that to prepare, or is that too short of an exam? Do you want to take?
Yeah, I mean, here's my take on the PSAT. The PSAT has no relation with college admissions. It does nothing for college admissions. So but it's good for practice tests. So it's great for practice tests, and you can use the PSAT to tell you where your strengths and weaknesses are. Most students do much better on the PSAT just because it's only 2 hours versus 4.5 hours. So, and there's no essay on it. So I wouldn't say, oh, I did well on the PSAT, I'm going to do well on the SAT. You might not be ready for a 4 hour exam. You might 2 hours is not as bad. So it's a great practice test, but I wouldn't use it more than that. If you're a junior, you can win a National Merit Scholarship, but less than 0.5% of the country are eligible for that. So most students are not, so it really has no relevance in it. If you're preparing, I wouldn't use the PSAT as my only preparation tool because it's not. You need a lot more than that. That's only one 2 hour exam. You need 4 to 5 exams. You need to be really preparing for it if you want to get hundreds of points higher than that. So that's what I would
Great.
say about the PSAT.
I'm getting some questions about SAT versus ACT. We are doing an ACT presentation, which will Anthony will also be leading. Correct, Anthony? I think you're doing that one.
Yes,
A week from
exactly.
today, same time,
Hmm.
same place, your computer. There is
Yeah.
some overlap there, but it'll kind of give you an idea of what the ACT is like. But generally speaking, they're slightly different exams, and the only way to know which one's better for you is to take a practice test of each one and see which one you score higher in. Anything to add there, Anthony?
Right. We have again we have free practice tests. You can take an SAT or an ACT. We also have what we call a PRA, which is a Princeton assessment, which actually has half SAT, half ACT. So you take one exam, we'll tell you which one you may be better suited for. But in terms of which one is better, it really depends on the student and what their strengths and weaknesses are. So the ACT is a little more straightforward and curriculum based. SAT is a little more tricky, but it depends on the student. So I would say practice and learn about both exams before you make a decision. If you're a senior, I would just stick with, or if you're a senior, just stick with the one you've been working on because there's just no time to switch over to a whole new exam.
What about, I'm getting a lot of questions about the essay. Can you just very briefly touch on the SAT essay, how that works, and if there's any basic strategies for that?
You know that there won't be enough time. I mean, basically, it's a 25-minute essay, and if you prepare properly and you know what you have to do well on the SAT essay, it's not it won't be that difficult. It does account for about one third of your writing score. So you get a grammar score, a raw score, and an essay raw score. It combines into your 200 to 800 writing score. So it can count for almost one third of your score. So it can become a very powerful tool to improve your score. So what I can say is understand what they're asking of you, and you're going to want to learn some strategy surrounding that. And that strategy surrounding that, that would be a whole nother session. So
Yep.
I'll just
Sorry, I
leave.
even mentioned that. It's a can of worms right there.
Yeah.
Some questions around and some confusion around the SAT subject tests.
Uh-huh.
Can you just touch on what those are briefly?
Yeah, those for more competitive schools, some schools require when you're looking at college admissions the SAT or ACT plus some subject tests, and those are subject-specific exams. There's chemistry, physics, biology. There's U.S. history. There's world history. There's English lit. There's languages. So some schools will require two or three of those subject exams. So if you want to apply to a competitive school, you need to find out what they require for admissions. Because if you don't take those subject exams, you won't get in no matter how good you are on the SAT and your grades. So they're more content based. They're less tricky. They go hand in hand with your AP exams. So if you're in an AP course in U.S. history, you might want to consider taking the subject test in U.S. history because ETS, who also writes the SAT, they write the AP and the subject exam. So it would make sense if you're in a class right now in that subject to take the AP in May and the subject test in June of that subject. So those are very powerful. Um, Let me see if I have.
And well,
Here's
everyone who's asking about, I know people want to, we'll get the
here's
recording,
some of
but
the websites, by the way.
for the slides, we'll send you everyone all the slides too, so you can see all these.
Yeah.
And then the final question, I know it's a little bit after the hour now, but a few questions that are on this. I think it's important. I'll take a quick stab at it and then let Anthony take it from there. But people are asking about, how many questions should they answer on the SAT? Should they do the hard questions first and get those out of the way? And as Anthony touched on, it's order of difficulty. So the easy questions at the beginning, the very hard questions that very few people get right at the end. So you want to go slowly, take your time and answer the easier questions. Make sure you get those right and don't make careless mistakes. Unless you're someone who's scoring, over 2,000 or kind of in the 90th, upper 90th percentile, you're probably going to want to leave a few questions blank at the very end of each section because those are the tough ones. And the more time you waste on those and still don't get them right, the less time you're going to have to make sure you get all the easy ones correct.
Yeah, I'm tutoring two kids right now. One of them is a high-scoring math student. He does all the math questions. He never does the hard ones first. There's no point in it. You might as well you got to do the easy and medium ones first. You do the hard ones last, no matter who you are. Doesn't make sense. Um, and then the other student I'm tutoring, he's not allowed to do the hard ones. He still has to earn. He's still got to get to. He can't get to a 600 yet. Until he gets to a 600, he can't do the hard questions. So his pacing is different than my other student. So what I would ask of you, whoever asked that question, is if you're asking, should I do the hard questions? Well, I don't know who you are, but if you've taken a practice test and you're scoring 500 in math, you probably shouldn't be doing the hard questions. If I look at it deeper, especially if you're missing some easy questions, you should be getting 100% of the easy questions correct. So do those first. You know where they are. Then do the medium ones, and then do the hard ones. They do come in order. So that's kind of what I would say about the approach of the test. And that's kind of what goes to what I said earlier is take the test on your own terms. Don't do the hard ones first because you'll spend 5 or 10 minutes on each one of those and you'll never get to the easy ones, which are easy. So another point I wanted to make too is when you're determining if you need prep or if you should be working with someone or anything, what I try to do is take a practice test, see what your score is, find out what the school's average score is. So here's a list of some schools, and let's just say you want to go to Columbia, or you wanted to go to Duke, or here's some circled. I mean, pick a school on here that you're interested in. Take a practice test. If you're scoring 1600 on it and you want to go to Brown, Brown's average SAT score is over 2100. You're very far from your goal. Well, that's a big gap. You're going to need some definite formal prep, if not a tutor or a very intensive program over the summer to get that kind of improvement. That just doesn't happen overnight. That's going to determine what type of prep you probably need. For some of you thinking, well, Anthony told me a few things, now I'm ready to go. Well, take a practice test. That'll determine if you're ready to go or not. If you're 2, 3, 4, 500 points from your goal, you're going to need a lot of work, and that's where the techniques come in, such as Princeton techniques. They're proven. We use those. You're going to need some proven techniques because what you did on the practice test, obviously, if you're 400 points from your goal, is too far. So take a practice test, see how you're doing. Now, some of you might not have that time, but that's the first thing every student of ours does before they start the program. We want to know their baseline. Then their teacher has an idea of where they're at. It's very important. Again, it doesn't go on your record, so it's kind of nice that it's a practice test.
All right, excellent. Well, Anthony, thanks for all your time and your great tips. Everyone, thanks for your great questions. I know we didn't get the chance to answer them all, but we will send you follow-up emails with all this information. If you do have further questions for Anthony, you know how to get a hold of him. And we're going to be doing this for the ACT a week from today. So to sign up for that or any future Zinch webinars, just go to zinch.com/webinar, like you already did. And Anthony, anything to add before we say goodbye?
No, thanks everybody, and good luck. And like I said, feel free to reach out to me if you have specific questions about your situation, and I'm happy to help you.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.